Yeah, so there's still a connection there, and since there's so much suppression of knowledge and suppression of books about this particular epoch, it's very difficult to put the pieces together. It's taken me the best years of 20 years of constant research to even get to the knowledge I have now about it, and even that is probably, subject to a lot of alteration down the line.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've uncovered a lot, Michael. It really is fantastic, the work you have done, especially for, I mean, we're quite new to this alternative research movement ourselves, and it's people like yourself who really have set a benchmark for us, you see, which is fantastic. Michael, if we can look at maybe possibly the lineage of these Hyksos warriors in terms of, do you trace them back to Atlantis?
Well, ultimately, of course, it all comes from Atlantis, because, or not just Atlantis, but the whole how many continents there may have been, the whole pre-Diluvian setup, in which one has to entertain the idea that in ancient history there were sophisticated civilizations. I know that's a difficult one for most people to take. There is a certain amount of proof proving it, but until it's something that nobody can really be sure of. You can only speculate.
Yeah.
But the point being that if you do take it on board, then the evidence shows you that when those Western civilizations declined, the civilization from those places, the remnants of it, the ancient books are telling you that it came to Britain, just like it did when it went further west. It arrived in Mexico, like those ancient books say. Well, closer to Europe, it arrived in Britain and got transplanted then throughout the rest of the lands. That implies that these Hyksos, see, in my reading of it, the Hyksos people, Hyksos just means shepherd kings.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And shepherd is an allusion to the stars, by the way, not the sheep. Shepherd is an esoteric code word. All the pharaohs were known as the shepherds of their people. Jesus Christ was portrayed as the shepherd of his people. Shepherd is an allusion to a magus, a magi, an astrologer king. Right. So in my work, and this is going by Annals of Ireland, by the way, and also the Annals of Ancient Scotland, that go a long way to explaining who these people were. These were originally people, in my belief, the Hyksos are the famous Scythian warriors that people believe, scholars believe, originated in the Ukraine area, and that's not true, although that was one of their districts. The Scythians were actually displaced from Britain during the cataclysms, the ancient cataclysms that destroyed the ancient Atlantis and the pre-Diluvian continents. That cataclysm didn't just start and then finish. There was waves of cataclysm. Okay, granted, a little bit less devastating, but the Northwest was wrecked even as late as 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years BC, I mean, by very severe famines and droughts and tsunamis and stuff. So there was tremendous cataclysm there, and what it meant was that as long ago as 10,000 years, the same period of time when the Indus Valley rivers dried up. So now they photographed that from satellite. So what we're talking about is absolutely confirmed. The same type of natural phenomena, the desertification, the drying up of rivers, the terrible droughts and the famines that affected not only Mycenae, Egypt. Egypt was wrecked by a famine, by the way, at exactly the time of Nefertiti. Out of 6 of their daughters, I think 3 died of famine, or 4 died of famine.
Right.
A great famine. And then there was the eruption of Mount Thera on the island of Santorini. We have the Bronze Age drought and Bronze Age famine in Britain. We have the Storegga tsunami, which happened in northern Norway. And we have various other cataclysms all happening somewhat contemporaneously. So the world was wrecked.
Yeah.
And then the famous disasters of the northern India, in which the entire Saraswati River, one of the biggest rivers ever known in history, completely dried up, leaving millions of people, giant communities, completely wiped out. They're now digging them up, so they know that it wasn't just a handful of people. There was literally millions of people lived in the northern India places, which were always spoken of in ancient legends as being one of the cradles of civilization. Well, Britain went through the even worse devastation. And this, of course, what happened is that the peoples had to vacate. So I positioned the Scythians, just like Commons Beaumont did, the great scholar, in northern Scotland and Britain. That was their homeland. Only under that guise, they were known as the Phoenicians. As I say, there's been a big deception, so we have a false understanding of all of these people. But the original Phoenicians lived in Scotland, if you can believe it. And at that time, there was a land bridge that connected the northern Scotland to Scandinavia, so there was no difference. There wasn't a Scotland like we know it today, and a Norway and a Sweden. They were all one land, all one mass of a land that, through the devastations you see, got split. This has been proven by the top brass now in geology in Norway. Professor Ulf Erlingsson has done the research to show that those land bridges existed, and there is no higher up the totem pole than him. So these people have shown that the devastation wrecked these lands and sunk these land bridges. So, of course, when you don't see the actual topography, you see what you see now with oceans and seas in between. People like me come along and say things, and people don't believe it because they don't know the facts, or they don't want to know the facts. I found out the facts not from geology, but from mythology. The myths are telling you, and I always took the myths and legend basically as anyone else would take facts. Now, to answer your question, though, I believe that those Scythians originally, their own ancestors, as the Irish legends say, came from Britain and Ireland originally, were displaced to the continent of Europe because they had to find shelter to live in, their people, and moved down through the Scandinavia and into the Russia and into the Ukraine, which is now where certain scholars will tacitly admit they came from. Now, these people were horseback riding people, and they were able to go into Palestine, where names of the Scythians still exist today. There's a city called Heliopolis, and many of the other cities in Egypt itself are officially known to be Phoenician/Scythian settlements. This is official. So we know that the Scythians were there. And although no one else has drawn the conclusion, I draw the conclusion that the Proto-Atenists and the Hyksos dynasty were probably Scythians.
Right.
In exactly the same way that the Irish legends say that the Scythians went as mercenaries to help a certain king, and the dates are very close to when Akhenaton reigned. And they say that the Scythian leaders went and became mercenaries to help a certain king, a solar-type king, to fight off the pagans. This is what the ancient Irish legends speak about. They were first translated into English in the 1600s, but they date from many hundred years before that.
I see.
And they're telling you something there, that the Scythians went, and because they had great intellectual affiliation and even mercantile affiliation and perhaps even bloodline affiliation with these certain kings who were fighting the pagan rivals, and when they won the war, the pharaoh turned around and gave bounty onto these Scythians, said, will become princes of the land, I'm going to give you land, and you can take any wives. And this is Irish legends talking about this. Then you add to that, in Navan Fort in Northern Ireland, you're finding Barbary apes buried that you can only find in Egypt. These apes. There's mentions of specific little tombs, like Ardmaka. It's a famous tomb of a queen up in Northern Ireland, near County Armagh. You find references to those places in Egyptian papyrus.
Really?
Yep. And vice versa, in Irish documents, you find mention of connections to Egypt, names, and so on. And then when you dig even deeper, you start finding that there's even Egyptian kings from a lot further back than when Akhenaton was born. And there's even the story, which is central to Scottish and Irish legends, that Princess Scota, from which Scotland gets its name, who is a daughter of Akhenaton and Nefertiti, is buried in County Kerry in Northern Ireland.
Gosh.
You see, this kind of stuff starts coming up. Then recently, in the last 10 years, an archaeologist by the name of Lorraine Evans, who specializes in digs, start digging up Egyptian beads and boats in England and in Scotland, in Ireland as well, digging up Egyptian beads only made there in the world.
Yeah.
Then in the tomb of Tutankhamun, you find torques. These are sort of bracelets that are in the Celtic design, the so-called Celtic design of Ireland, only made like that in Ireland by the so-called Celts. I would more correctly say Gaels. You find hundreds of them, not 10, not 20. They say that I think there was up to like 70 or more torques. And there was more because the tomb of Tutankhamun was raided by the agents of the Rothschilds long before it was open to the public. So if the public, after it was open to the public and they say, we found 70 bizarre torques, you can damn well bet there was many, many more, but they had been taken